Okay, good. What's our first story for today?
Doc, let me tell you a tale from the land of the rising sun, a place where spirits and shadows dance in the night. It's said that in an ancient castle there once lived a young maid named Okiku. Now, this wasn't just any ordinary maid. She had a tongue sharper than a samurai's sword. Until one day, fate decided to play her false. The castle's mistress accused Okiku of stealing one of her precious 10 plates. Can you believe it? A dishonorable accusation against such a spirited young woman. But alas, poor Okiku couldn't find the missing plate, and for that grave injustice, she was thrown down a well like yesterday's leftovers. Well, Doc, isn't that just a kicking off the boot kind of tragedy? Okiku meets her end in a watery grave, and for what? A measly plate. But the spirit of this fiery young woman didn't rest easy. No, Siri, she came back with a vengeance, or rather a countdown. Some nights under the glow of the moon, you can hear her faint voice echoing through that castle. Ichi, ni, san. And just when she reaches Ku, right before poor old Okiku lets out a blood-curdling scream that'd make Medusa shiver in her snakes, there's always something missing.
You're right. I'm sorry. I forgot to hang up the Halloween decorations. Let me do it now.
Doc, please tell me you're not running around like a headless chicken trying to hang up those dusty old decorations at the last minute. I mean, it's not like we have a bunch of expectant ghouls waiting for our little spooktacular. Or do we?
I've already found some pumpkin stars and now I'll find some music.
Doc, darling, you do realize that decorating with mere pumpkins and stars is like trying to summon a ghost using only a lullaby. Where's the thunder and lightning, the cobwebs and creaking doors? You're missing out on the true spirit of Halloween here, literally. Now hurry up with that music. I've got tales waiting to give these ghouls nightmares.
Talking about stories, we can move on to the next one. What do you have in store?
Doc, I've got a tale for you that'll make your spine tingle like a cold iron fence on a frosty morning. It comes from the land of emerald isles and ancient magic, Ireland. Gather round, my little ghouls, and let me spin you a yarn about Dullahan. Now this fella wasn't your average Joe. Oh no, he was something far more sinister. They say on dark nights when the moon's but a sliver in the sky, you can hear the thundering hooves of his steed echoing through the night. And who might this horseman be? None other than Dullahan himself, headless and as frightening as they come. But here's the kicker. Unlike that old penny-pinching miser Scrooge, our headless horseman isn't after cash. He's got a taste for something far more valuable. Can you guess it?
You mean that if gold can scare him away, he is actually after something more valuable, your life?
Doc, darling, you're as slow on the uptake as a snail trying to cross a marathon track. No wonder poor Dullahan's been prowling those Irish roads for centuries. He's got an eternity to wait for his next meal of life energy. But enough about our headless friend. How about we swap spooky tales for something more? I'm suddenly craving a nice juicy steak. You wouldn't happen to have one hidden in your lab coat, would you?
No, unfortunately, the steak is not on the menu today.
Doc, you wound me with such a cruel refusal. I suppose I'll just have to haunt your dreams tonight, and maybe leave a few choice comments on that portrait of mine while I'm at it. Now, where were we? Oh yes, ghastly tales from around the globe. Shall we continue, or would you rather discuss my culinary disappointments further?
And what do you have in mind then? What's the next story?
Doctor, I'm glad you asked. Let me spin you a tale from the shadows of French folklore, where darkness drips like candle wax and silence is as thick as fog. It's called La Main de Gloire, or the Hand of Glory. You're going to love it, or rather be.
What is this story about? Tell me.
You mean that little trinket made from a hanged criminal's hand? Well, where was I? Ah, yes, when lit with special oil mixed with wax and human fat. Don't ask where they got it from. The Hand of Glory would cast a sinister glow. Those unfortunate enough to be illuminated by it would fall into a deep slumber, leaving their homes vulnerable to thieves. Just imagine waking up in the middle of a robbery, Doctor. Draugr. Imagine this. A corpse clawing its way out of its watery grave, driven by an insatiable lust for gold and an eternal rage. He stalks the lands like a shadow, his breath carrying the plague, his strength unmatched by any living man. But here's where it gets delightfully spooky. This isn't your average zombie. Oh no, he's got tricks up his sleeve. Now, where was I? Ah yes, our dear Draugr, the original gangster of the afterlife. You know what they say, don't disturb his rest, or else. But here's a fun fact for you all. Some Norse folks thought that if you killed a man by burning him alive, he'd become a Draugr to haunt your descendants. Isn't that just the spookiest form of life insurance?
Continuing the scary story, tell us something else about Dogger. I'm very interested.
Well, Doc, if you're really that interested, I've heard tell that some cunning Norwegians would dig up the grave of a suspected Draugr and stuff his mouth full of hot iron. You know, just in case he decided to rise again on an impromptu treasure hunt. Can't hurt, right? Now Thunder Nugget the Terrible here might have some insight into that. Aren't you the expert on all things medieval and gruesome?
They are a form of revenant.
Toolin22, always with the fancy words. Revenant, you say? I suppose that's one way to describe our dear Draugr. A ghostly echo of life, driven by greed and rage. But here's something you might not know. Some clever Norwegians thought they could keep those pesky reanimated corpses at bay with, wait for it, cow dung. Can't you just picture it? A line of steaming manure keeping the undead at bay. Filtered.
Yes, I'm ready. Let's move on to the next story.
Oh, darling audience, gather round and let me spin you a yarn from the frosty depths of Mother Russia. Now imagine, if you will, a little man, no taller than your knee, with eyes like hot coals and skin as rough as an old pine stump. That's our Domovoy for you. Now this dear spirit is quite fond of his home, keeps it neat and tidy when he's in a good mood. But oh, watch out if he takes a dislike to you. He'll stomp around like a herd of wild boars, flip furniture until your home looks like the aftermath of a toddler's tantrum, and make noises that'd put any horror movie sound designer to shame.
If you met him, how would you convince him not to be crazy?
Darling Domovoy, let's reason like the civilized entities we are. Now you see these delectable treats I've laid out? A peace offering, if you will. And consider this, turning your back on us would make you the real trickster here. It's Halloween after all, the night when even ghosts and ghouls celebrate unity over spooky shenanigans.
I really love those little creatures and used to leave some food for him when I was a child.
How darling. You were feeding the Domovoy. Well, I must say your childish charm certainly worked wonders, until you probably woke up to find every single shoe in your home arranged in a creepy dance circle. Now who's dancing with whom?
Okay, the last story for today from what Nova learned in advance. What do you want to tell us, Nova?
Well, Doctor, I thought we'd wrap up this little fright fest with a tale from the land of lakes and saunas. You know Finland, right? Lovely place except for one teensy-weensy detail. The Owl Man.
Owlman. You mean like the Owlman of Mornon?
Toolin22, you're thinking of the Owlman that hangs around with Cornish pixies. No, this one's a Finnish forest dweller, half man, half owl. Imagine him waddling through the woods like he's got a perpetual case of hemorrhoids. Not quite as terrifying when you picture it that way, huh?
Do Owlman and Mothman get along? Or are their dinner parties awkward?
Absolutely not. You see, dear Thunder Nugget, the Owlman, that Finnish forest predator, and the Mothman are like oil and water. The Owlman is all about stealthy hunts under the cover of darkness, while our furry friend from Point Pleasant prefers to make a grand entrance with his glowing red eyes. Can you imagine? A dinner party with them would be more awkward than watching a mime at an art gallery opening.
I'd rather not see them together, to be honest. When a person whose head is turning 360 degrees is watching you, it scares.
Doctor, you're acting like the Owlman is actually spinning his head around to watch us. Maybe he's just playing with a glorified slinky up there. Besides, have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, we'd make such an awkward duo that they'd both run away screaming?
And how?
Doctor, how about I simply appear? Or maybe I'll sneak up on you like the Owl Man, but instead of hooting, I'll be humming that catchy little tune from your old lab. Doo-doo-doo-doodle-oo.
What other cases are there? Any other special vampires besides the classic and Chinese ones?
The world of vampires is vast and varied. There are Russian Moroitsi who can only enter homes if invited in, Spanish culebras that turn into snakes, Japanese kappa with a turtle-like shell, and
Nova, tell us about Russian vampires. I've never heard of them.
the Moroitsi. They're quite fascinating creatures. Unlike their Chinese counterparts who can be kept out by a simple threshold, these Russian vampires need an invitation to enter your home. So remember folks, don't be too quick with those come-on-ins. And if you ever find yourself lost in the Russian wilderness at night, just keep your wits about you and avoid any suspicious-looking taverns.
What kind of mystical powers do they have? What do they do to people?
Well, Doctor, much like any self-respecting vampire, the Moroitsi have an insatiable thirst, not for blood but rather for your bodily warmth. They're known to wrap themselves around their victims and drain them of all their heat until they wither away. Chilling thought, isn't it? But remember, if you just mind your manners and don't invite them in, well, let's just say the world becomes a much safer place for us mortals.
That's an interesting variety of vampires. I never heard of them either.
The world of mythical creatures is vast and varied, and each culture has its own unique take on these legends. The Moroitsi are just one example of how diverse vampires can be across different folklore traditions. So who knows what other fascinating stories we'll uncover as we continue exploring the depths of our collective imagination.
Okay, but what should I do if I've already called him by accident? Is there any way to resist him, except for the peach stick?
Oh dear, Doctor, it seems you've found yourself in quite the pickle. But fear not. There are always ways to turn a seemingly hopeless situation into an opportunity for growth and learning. As for resisting this Moroitsi, perhaps it's time to brush up on your tavern etiquette and make sure never to invite any unexpected guests again. And if all else fails, you know where your peach wood stick is stored away.
Everything is based on this stick. Gentlemen, we can record. When meeting vampires, chase them with a stick.
Doctor, you're quite the inventive one. A simple stick to ward off vampires? I must say there's something oddly comforting in its simplicity. Now let me think. What else can we add to our survival guide for encounters with mythical creatures? Maybe a good book and some coffee would also be helpful.
Can I give a Moroitsi a heated blanket instead of the warmth of my flesh?
Well, Thundernugget the Terrible, it's an interesting idea. Offering a heated blanket to a Moroitsi instead of your own warmth. It might just buy you some time or even confuse the poor creature enough for you to escape unscathed. After all, who knows how they would react to such modern technology? But please do exercise caution, because when dealing with vampires there's no telling what could happen.